Hi, I'm Quest, and I'm delighted that you're watching Creativity Over Quality. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made my new belt, this one, and I'm going to go over the fastening of the buckle, the scale carving, the pattern carving, the knotwork with the polyamory heart, and some edge treatment and coloring. I started by cutting a strip of leather 4 centimeters wide, long enough to go around me and about 30 centimeters extra, cutting one end square and the other to a tip. For the imprint to take, the leather has to be wet. I of course measured so that the heart is in the middle of my back. To make the outlines really straight and of equal distance to the edge, I use a compass. When you sharpened your tools, it is just to follow the lines. Maybe you recognize the symbol in the middle. It is the infinity heart, which stands for polyamory. Maybe we'll talk about that in some other time. There are thousands of stamps out there, but most leather tooling can be done with a couple of bevelers and a few backgrounders. I'm using my large beveler here that is 7 millimeters wide. I try to be as consistent as possible with my strikes, starting with a firm strike and then lightly tapping out any ridges that might occur. I have 3 different sizes of backgrounders with the same pattern. I almost always use the smallest one. The larger the stamp, the more force you have to put into the strike, so I find it easier to use a small stamp and rapidly tap away. This is our 3rd video, so we're still experimenting with different techniques, and maybe the shaky hand camera won't be a keeper. We'll see. To make the 3D effect of the knotwork really stand out, I use the small beveler beveling the ends of the lines that are going under other lines. Figuring out how long to make the scale pattern, I first needed to decide how much space the buckle will take up. I measure out 10 centimeters for stitching, then 2.5 centimeters for the oblong hole that the buckle pin will go through, marking that with a hole punch. And then 10 more centimeters for stitching. Then I add 2 centimeters and make a mark for where the scale pattern should end. Now I'm going to mark the edges of the scale pattern, so I wet the leather again and use the same outline for the tips as I did for the knotwork. Due to a slight brain fart, I marked every 7 millimeter which fits okay for my small beveler that is 4mm, but the ratio between the spacing and the beveler size should really be roughly 1.4. Then I draw diagonal lines at 45 degrees. And then the other way to create squares. Now I'm of course making a belt, but you can use scales on anything. If you're making a bracelet or armor or just anything. It is an easy pattern that will be very effectful. Now I use my 4mm beveler and point it away from me, to the right of the camera, and stamp once in each square. Then I turn it 90 degrees counterclockwise and do the same thing again. And there we go, a scale pattern in no time at all. Now I'm going around the edge with my large beveler. And then just do the same thing once more again on the other side of the heart pattern, creating another field of scales. I bevel the edges all around the belt, front and back, except for the back side where I'm stitching for the buckle. Now the belt loop. I measure it around 2 layers of the belt and make a mark. Then cutting it to size. After beveling the edges, I eyeball a position for it, making room for 2 identical rectangles, one on either side of the loop, and mark it out. I want to stitch a box on each side of the belt loop, so it's really sturdy. I first mark them out with my stitching groover. And I know you can't see it, but I then mark the corners of the rectangles for the other side of the buckle. The stitching groove helps protect the thread from any wear and tear. Then I punch holes in all the boxes with my stitching chisel. And in the short edges of the loop piece. Then I trim the edge a bit and we're almost ready to stitch. But first, edge treatment. Sanding all the edges on both sides, well, you get the picture. Try to ignore the glue for now. I use water to wet the edges of the piece that I can't get to after we stitched it all together. Order of operations is key. Then go over with an edge slicker. Now we just put in the buckle and we're ready to go. Wait. What's wrong with this picture? Right. Order of operations. The loop piece first. While I do the loop piece, I'd like to talk a bit about what this belt represents to me. Well, as you might have noticed, I'm a rather big person. It is hard for me to find clothes that fit, so instead of looking for a belt for 6 days, I'm making my own. As a big person, you have to endure certain things. One of those things is that everyone you meet thinks that they are the first one to notice that you're a big person, and therefore they have to point it out, in case you didn't already know. Another thing is the fat shamers, and I don't want to hear a word about it being about them caring about my health. They know nothing about my health. Having an excess of fat isn't a health issue on its own. Having a bad lifestyle is. And being shamed about it does not make going to the gym any easier. But what bugs me the most are those acquaintances. You know, the ones who don't really know you very well, but they think they know you well enough so they can make friendly jokes about you. Can we just agree that unless a person hasn't explicitly asked us, we don't comment on their body, regardless if they're fat, thin, tall, short, purple, what have you. To comment on people's achievements, or for that matter shortcomings that they're in control over, is one thing, but please don't comment on other people's bodies. I'll tell you a little story to get some perspective. 2 years ago, at a medieval fair, I got 249 comments about my body size over 8 days. That is 2 times every waking hour. That gets really, really tiring. It made me feel ashamed, angry, frustrated, and I felt like a freak show. I didn't want to go out. Some people think it is a compliment to say so that somebody's huge, but hearing it 2 times an hour makes me feel like a freak. So if you want to give me a compliment, please pick something else, like the belt I'm making, for example. Now let's focus on the glue. Apply glue all over the area where the rectangles are. Apply it as thin as possible and let it dry enough so that it's not sticky when you touch it. Then we're gonna fold it over and stitch it with a saddle stitch. Be really careful to line up the holes for the stitches. You only get one chance here. This is how I do a saddle stitch. I finish it up by pushing the needle out through the side to hide the ends, then tie, cut, and burn. Now we can go over the rest of the edges with the edge slicker. Mark holes at 5 cm distance and punch them with a tool of your choice. And of course I'll make it black. I'll use a brush at this part to make sure I can reach all the details, but a sponge works for the rest of the belt. And now we're almost done. I want the edges to be real smooth and shiny, so I go over them with some gum track and an edge slicker. And for the final step, some leather fat and really work it in. And we're done! Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you liked it. You can find the artwork for this and other projects on our Patreon page. Links are in the description. Now, as we say in our hometown, ha det gött, hej!